Hi golfers, Nick here from GOLFTEC Singapore. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week on golf tips, we're going to take a look at the 3D motion of the hips. So you can see I've got the sensors on here that we use at GOLFTEC. However, today it's going to be slightly different. In the past, when I've been looking at these sensors, we use the video and we take a look at the face-on view and the side view. Today we're actually going to take a look at the rear view. We're going to take a look at how these sensors move from behind. It's quite a unique view to view how the body moves. Now there's been a lot of debate on how the hips move in the golf swing. So this sensor that was placed on the hip, we're going to see how that moves. And we're going to look at it compared to what the tour averages do. So I've got the studio set up here. You can see I've moved the poly box that we use to calculate these measurements. I've done that for the purpose of the video, just so you can see this clearly when I'm explaining it. Then afterwards I'm going to hit a shot and just record the swing, and we're going to take a look at it in a bit of detail, see how the hips move in relationship to what the tour players do. So over the years here at GOLFTEC, we've been able to measure what the tour players do. And when we're coaching here, we use these sensors and we relate them back to green numbers as what the tour averages are. So today, we're going to discuss how these sensors should move from the rear view this time. And then we're going to take a look at my swing and see how that relates to the tour players at certain points in the golf swing. So we're going to concentrate on the hip sensor here. You can see from the cameras here, I've got the rear view camera set up instead of face on. So in my setup, you can see where the sensors are placed. You've got the one for the hip and one for the shoulders. Now, if I make a correct backswing, you take note of where this sort of hip sensor is. You'll see how in my backswing, it's moving towards the target. Now, for me to keep this in position, I would have to shift and sway quite a lot as I turn, because as I turn, this sensor automatically moves towards the target, the center point here. Also notice with my hips, we're going to take a look at this on the video and the angles, see how from the rear view here, it looks like this strap is quite level to the ground. Now, if I make a backswing, you'll see how that slightly tilts as well. So not only am I rotating, I'm also tilting my hips and I'm tilting my shoulders. So today we're going to look at how the body tilts and how these sensors move, obviously focusing mainly on this hip sway, but just to give you guys a little bit of an idea, these sensors are set at 0 at setup. Now, when I move back in my backswing, the tour players on average will move 3.9 inches towards with this sensor. High handicappers, they only move about an inch towards. Okay? So the best players will actually move it 3.9 inches towards on average. And then by the time they start down, they get to about this point here, it's roughly between 4 and 5 inches towards, then maybe a couple of inches. And then by the time they get to impact, it's only about 1.5 inches towards the target. So can you see as I rotate, this sensor moves back that way. If I rotate in the backswing, it moves towards. So what is interesting is that the sensor reading will actually be more towards at the top of the backswing. That's just because of the rotation of the body. However, in the finish, as we go through, that sensor should have moved roughly 3 inches towards the target from where it started. So let me hit a shot, and then we're going to take a look at the swing and relate it back to the motion measurements, see how close that is to what the tour players do, and show you guys how these sensors should actually move from a different perspective. Okay, so pretty straight shot there. Just taking in a little bit of data. So you saw the shot on the screen there, pretty straight shot. 92 miles an hour clubhead speed, 3-degree path, 6 degrees downwards, ball's pretty much out the middle of the club face. It launched around 18 degrees, spun around 6,000. The ball was a little bit of a push draw and it carried around 173 with a 7-iron. So pretty good golf shot, pretty close to where the tour averages would be. Let's sit down now and take a look at the golf swing from the rear view camera. So you saw me hit the shot there, pretty good golf shot, very similar sort of club data to where a tour player would be with a 7-iron. So on the screen here you can see I've got 2 viewpoints, and the reason for that is I've got the poly box set up on the left. So basically this machine here is measuring the 3D motion from the 2 sensors that I'm wearing. So the left hand screen is going to give us the motion, the right hand screen here is going to show us clearly how these sensors move. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put a little spot on the middle of that sensor at setup, which is P1. We're going to take it to position 4, which is the top of the backswing here. So if I stop it there, I'm just going to put a spot now, do that in a different colour, we'll do that in red. So we're going to put a spot now where the sensor's positioned. and then we're going to bring up some motion numbers. So I brought up some motion numbers on the screen there. So first of all, the hip sways 5 inches towards. So from yellow to red spot, I've moved my hips 5 inches towards. I've also got the hip tilt of 13 degrees, so my hips are turning on an angle. My shoulders are turning on an angle. It's hard to see from this viewpoint here. It's best to see this from down the line, but I'm going to reference the shoulder tilt again later on in the swing. So I just wanted to note those two positions with the tilt. So hip tilt 13, shoulder tilt 37. Just notice all these numbers are green, so they're within sort of the tour average range. So let's take the swing down. I'm going to leave the hip sway number there. Let's take it down to sort of the left arm sort of parallel position here. So what you'll notice is the hip sway is still reading towards 4.4 inches. You'll see the sensor from the right hand picture from the red spot, it's just moved a fraction away, and that's just because of the way I'm turning my body. So just important to note that. That's why the sensor reads more towards at the top of the backswing than it does at impact, because of the rotation of the way we move the body and the way the position of the sensor is. Now if we keep it going to shaft parallel P6, you'll see how again the sensor is 1.4 inches towards, not as much as was at the top, but that's because my hips are now turning. Now let's take it down to the impact position here, and at impact here 0.6 inches towards. So I'm just going to put do this in blue, just put another spot on the middle of the sensor, so you can see how the sensor is now closer than yellow, but obviously not as close to the target as where red was at the top of the backswing. We're also going to bring up some other motion numbers here. So I've brought up these two motion numbers we looked at the top of the backswing, P4. So first one is the hip tilt is now to the right. So it was left at the top, 13, now it's 8 to the right. So you can see how the hips are turning on an angle again. And also the shoulder tilt is now 38. Now you can see this a bit clearer now from this viewpoint. So basically my shoulders are tilted 38 degrees there, and that's because my hips are pushed towards the target. We're going to look at another reference line in a minute, and you might be able to see this a bit clearer, but just notice how as I'm pushing my hips towards that left tilt that we had at the top of the backswing is now becoming a right tilt. Let's move this on to the finish position and just mark in where these sensors are. So at position 9 in the finish, 2.9 inches towards. So let's do that and say green. So you can see the green spot there. So you can see how that sensor's moved in the course of the swing, and now it's roughly 3 inches closer to the target than where it started. Now I also want to just mention one more reference line here. I'm going to put a line on the trail leg here. So when we're measuring golf swings at GOLFTEC here, we always put a line on that leg, and you'll see how the best players will create daylight in the backswing. And just notice at these positions how the hips are moving progressively more towards the target throughout the course of the swing. I think that's quite important. So my hips within the tour averages, and you'll see how throughout the course of this swing my hips are moving towards the target, and that's a really key point. So finally, just want to just reference these tilt numbers. So at P4 you see the same numbers before, 37 degrees to the left of the shoulders, and the hips 13. So at impact you'll see how these numbers change now. So the shoulder tilt goes from 37 left to 38 right, and the hips go from 13 left to 8 right. That just helps me as I'm moving my hips progressively forward. You'll see from the that green line there at the back of my right hip there, you see as I'm moving forward my hips are turning on an angle to help keep my inclination to the ground. That's really sort of key point there. And if I move this into the finish there, I still have a slight right tilt with the shoulders and a slight right tilt with the hips. But more importantly, as we talked about today, that hip sensor has moved towards the target. So I think that's quite an interesting video there, looking at the golf swing from the different viewpoint that we don't normally look at. And with these readings you can see how these are what the tour players do. There's no arguments, this is what they do. So any questions on that, golfers, post them in the box below. If you don't already, please follow me on other social media platforms, and we'll see you again next week for another video on golf tips.